I've had the opportunity over the past several months to do some visits outside of the country to other places. And one of the things that always stands out to me naturally is um, how does their hospitality differ from ours in the US? And most recently went to Cuba, and a few things stood out, and I'm going to share those on today's episode. Welcome back to the Hospitality Hacks Pro Show. This is your host, Tasha Jackson. We come together once a week to talk about tips, tricks, and tidbits, hacks, if you will, that will help your operation run smoother. All thoughts, feelings, and opinions expressed are mine and mine alone, and not representative of any other entity, individual, or corporation. Let's talk Cuba. Let's talk Cuba. Went to Cuba, and I was a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie. Cuba is our relationship with Cuba has been a little um mm, torrid. Like there's been some things happening the past several decades that have made just open tourism. If you're a United States citizen, just saying, "Hey, yeah, I just want to go be a tourist and hang out," that's not you're not going to be allowed to travel to Cuba. There's several reasons that you can state to say that are your reasons for going, but just like, yeah, I'm just going to kick it. It's not on the list. It's not on the list. Another thing that kind of made me nervous is that if you're traveling, one of the reason that I stated for going was for support of the Cuban people, right? Which is a valid one of the, I believe, 12 valid reasons that you can state for going there. But you can't stay as a U.S. citizen. We can't. Our money has to go towards the local culture and local people, and not the government directly, right? So since the hotels, most of the hotels are 51% or more owned by the government, that means that you can't stay in a hotel, right? And so we had to stay in, and I don't say had to stay as if it was a bad experience, but we stayed in a short-term rental, Airbnb, and it was pleasant. Um, the pictures matched what was offered as far as amenities and the space. Um, a couple of challenges: the Wi-Fi was spotty, and that's not just at that particular place that we were at, but that is kind of an ongoing issue, from what I understand, um, in multiple different areas. So the Wi-Fi it had some moments where it was in and out, in and out. What else was a challenge? It was really, really hot, and uh, the AC, there was a window unit, several different window units, and um, they worked. Well, one of them was a window unit. One of them was like is something I hadn't seen before, but it was like attached to the wall. But it looked like one of those window units you would put in the window to blow air. I don't know, but um, it was also part of its functioning was attached to the Wi-Fi. So when the Wi-Fi would go out, it would kind of you couldn't control it, or it would just turn off until the Wi-Fi came back on. So that was kind of like, okay. But the people were super welcoming. Um, Walking down the streets and everything, people were just like, "Welcome to Cuba. Where are you from?" Very pleasant. I still did kind of feel like it was apparent that we were tourists, right? Probably for multiple reasons. Um, how we were dressed, the fact that we had a bottle of waters in our hand, that's not something that the locals indulge in. And in fact, it was very difficult to find bottled water. At the very first day we were there, I ended up buying several bottles from a restaurant that we went to. And then another day, we were walking down the street, and it was like a kind of a bar type situation, but they had a cooler close to the sidewalk where they had some food items for sale, and then some of those and included bottled water. So we grabbed some there, but it was tough. We went to what okay. So this is just a general recap. So things are kind of just coming to mind as I'm sharing my experience with you guys. So it's not in any particular order, but if you're just tuning in or jumping in the middle, I'm recapping my experience visiting Cuba recently, and how their hospitality differs from ours slightly. So with the Airbnb, I liked that the host came and met us. Super accommodating. There was no like self check-in in this particular unit, which it would have been hard to find. It would have been very, very difficult to find. I don't know if we would have found it if we didn't utilize the driver that was connected to the host. Right, they were like, hey, if you need a ride from the airport, we have a driver that can come pick you up. So we opted for that. And if we hadn't, I don't know that it would have been as smooth finding it. The street signs were you kind of just had to know where you're going. The street signs were there, but they were like on the sides of buildings, and it would have been very difficult if someone was not familiar. And we didn't have any landmarks to offer, like, oh, it's right by this or that, right? So I'm glad we opted for that. And we did change over money to the Cuban peso. Uh, you can use your debit or credit cards, but not everywhere. Okay, um, so that was coming into it. In my mind, I was prepared to just use Cuban pesos for everything. And then as we got out and about and started going places, I did notice that people would offer us the price in USD or in pesos, and so but I was nervous about that because I was told prior to going, yo, you're not allowed to use your debit card at all. Right. So it was just like, I don't need any trouble. I don't want to, so, and plus, now that I have all of this money, I need to use it up. Right. So mostly use Cuban pesos. So one of our dollars is equal to somewhere, or one US dollar is equal to something about it. There was a range. Right. And so it depends on the day of the week, like what's happening in the market and all that. But sometimes, so we paid anywhere from like 160, 165 Cuban pesos per one US dollar to 200 Cuban pesos equaling $1. So, and anywhere kind of in between there. Um, but the host was nice. There was a little bit of a challenge with um what do you call it? His first language was Spanish, but his English was very good. But some things got lost in translation. For instance, he offered us a SIM card so that our one of our phones could at least work while we were there. And the price that he offered, we didn't realize was like you renting the SIM card, not purchasing it. So we actually left town with the SIM card, and then he was sending a message like, please leave it. Please leave the SIM card. It's like, we're already gone at that point. And I really wish he would have said that at the beginning, because that would have been no problem. But um, so we couldn't stay in a hotel, which is okay. I actually enjoy staying in short-term rentals sometimes. Especially if they have good reviews and have proven themselves to be great hosts. There's no, sometimes it can be a little iffy because it's not like it's regulated. If you rent something off Airbnb or Peerspace or VRBO, like that stuff's not they don't have a boss telling them, did you make sure you dust and this and this and that? Like that's an individual who may be cleaning themselves, or they may be hiring a third party company to come in and clean. Right. And so you kind of never really know what you're going to get. So I rely heavily on reviews for things like that. I'm always looking at reviews to see, okay, if people are complaining, what are they complaining about? Is it something that's a deal breaker for me, or is it something that I could potentially handle? Like cleanliness to me is super important, top of the list, right? Number one, hands down. Working air, most definitely, especially if it's somewhere hot. Easy access. So like if you have a million stairs and you didn't reveal that in your listing, that's problematic for me. I didn't come in with that in mind. If I have luggage and bags, things like, no. But so those are kind of my top few things there as far as short-term rentals are concerned. Um let's talk food for a second. We're gonna talk food and we're gonna talk tips, and then if you have any questions, let me know. Leave it in the comment box. Send me a message on Instagram at Hospitality Hacks Pro, or whatever. And since I dropped that, I'm gonna just go ahead and say right now, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're on YouTube, I'll hit that notification bell as well so you can know when we have new episodes coming out. If you're listening through an audio experience, please leave us a review. Please leave 5 stars. That helps. That's the best way to help the channel. And also follow or subscribe if you can, depending on where you are listening. All right. But let's talk food. I found the food to be a challenge for me. And so much of a challenge to where I was like, let's just cook. Like when we got to about day two, let's was it day two, 2.5, let's cook something, right? And then the challenge became finding a market or grocery store. It was you I take for granted, born and raised US citizen, that there's a convenience store, grocery store, farmers market, every few miles, really. Like even in rural areas, you can get to, depending on where you are, but you can get to a grocery store, farmers market, food stand, or something very quickly, relatively quickly. This was a challenge. And what we found out was that Cuba actually, I didn't know this prior to traveling there, is on a ration system. So they're rationing foods to their citizens, right? And so just walking into a grocery store and buying whatever you want is not something that is a commonplace occurrence. So as we're searching, the first attempt to search for a grocery store or a market, our neighbor across from us in the apartment we were staying at said he was gonna lead us there, like show us where to go, right? So we're following him, and then as we're following him, we wind up at a restaurant. And so it's like, okay, this is not this is not what we wanted. What's going on, right? And so, oh well, the market is closed until tomorrow. It's closed. And it was late in the evening. So like, okay, give you a pass on that. I know you're probably getting a kickback from the owner of this or manager of this restaurant for bringing us here. We're hungry. Market's closed. You can't. It's not like we're gonna DoorDash or Uber Eats something, right? So okay, we ate at the restaurant, right? And so that was the first time I kind of experienced a little bait and switch. And that continued to happen. So then the following day, we linked up with a tour guide who was going to show us around at a later time. But in the midst of just kind of chopping it up, talking to him, he was walking us around a little bit around the city. So as he's walking us around, we then asked him to show us, like, where do the locals eat? Like where, because the night before we kind of got hit over the head. The meal was, I mean, $100 for a meal in the US for a dinner, couple drinks. I don't think there was dessert. That's okay, doable, right? But in my mind, it's like, if we can go to where the locals eat, it should be much, much cheaper. But the place that we were in, it was like bait and switch, bait and switch. Okay, I'm walking you to a restaurant, but on the way to the restaurant, let's stop by my man's who sells cigars out his living room. He works at a cigar factory where he has these cases of cigars and he's trying to sell. And so he's taking us through the history of cigar and showing us how to test if one is good quality and this and this and that. And then I'm like, dude, I'm hungry. Like, I appreciate that you got your hustle mode going. I appreciate that you need to feed your family, but like, this is not, like, I don't smoke cigars and I'm not interested. So that kind of thing kind of kept popping up, and so it was a little bit uncomfortable to me because, again, I'm already feeling like I'm a mark. Like, everybody knows I'm a tourist, or not from here. So, and it's like, you trying to get me for every dollar you can, and I can appreciate hustle mode, but also it's like there's a time and place for everything, right? So it was kind of like, all right. Um, so we never ended up. We finally ended up went to another restaurant. It was okay. Like the food was just okay. Everywhere we went, it was like I wasn't really feeling it. Very very pork heavy, very pork heavy. So when we finally did end up at a market, they had big slabs of like maybe pork shoulder. It wasn't really identified, so I knew it was pork, but I couldn't really tell many more details about it. Um, and so it's like, okay, no other protein in sight. And now when in observing the people walking down the street and stuff, like I did see one gentleman had like a fish. I don't know if he caught it himself or what, but he had like a whole fish in a bag walking down the street. Another gentleman had like a live chicken walking down the street. So I think like I guess it's one of those things where you just have to know where to go or know somebody, right, to get the hookup. Because when we went in the markets, we tried two different ones. Like there was no other protein other than pork. And so I'm like, okay. And first of all, what am I gonna do with a 10 pound? Like I'm on vacation. Like I just want a little something, maybe a pound, right? Like not a big slab of meat, right? And then secondly, I don't know that I mean, I eat pork, but I'm cool. So, and then even like leaving at the airport, there was not. I'm used to, and again, the U.S. I'm spoiled. I'm not gonna lie. I'm spoiled. I recognize my privilege, but I'm used to having, in our U.S. airports, a variety of different things. What do you want to eat? You want Chick-fil-A? You want a burger? You want chicken? You want tacos? You want a sandwich? You want to just something cool to drink? You want a smoothie? You want a pretzel? What do you like? All these options, right? Um, but in the airport leaving out from Cuba, it was kind of like your options were grilled cheese sandwich, roasted pork sandwich, um, and there was like a bar. So they will get you liquored up, right? But the food options were very very slim. And then I thought it was interesting that on the way out, they were like, "Oh no, you can't spend Cuban pesos. You have to spend USD or euro." I'm like, okay. It was an interesting experience. The other thing that stood out to me is that they didn't call a tip. It was like a gift or a present, right? So one of the like it was a young kid, probably teenager, probably maybe 13, 14. We were walking around one of the little plazas and asked him like, "Hey, where's the market at?" Like just trying to figure out where to get water and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, come on, come on, come on. I'll show you, right?" And then I knew he was going to want a tip after he showed us where the market was. And that was okay. Like I wasn't tripping about that. But it's like he showed us where it was. We went in, walked around. They didn't have anything that we wanted. And so then we came out and then he was like, "Please, ma'am, a present for me, please." Right. And I'm like, okay, so I hooked them up. Again, I already knew from when I asked him the first time, like, that's why he even, because I think he initiated conversation first saying, "Hey, how you doing? Whatever. Welcome to Cuba, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, yo, where can we find a market trying to get some agua, whatever, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I use my four little Spanish words that I remember from my 2 years taking Spanish. I said, man, I think I'm going to take a class. Because to be honest, in my classroom, a good deal of students, Spanish is their first language and as well as their parents. So I need to brush up on that. So that's my little, what else stood out? That's my little 2 cents, a brief recap about the hospitality that I experienced in Cuba. The people were super nice, super welcoming. Um, you know, I started to be a little bit more careful about who I interacted with and spoke to after the first couple days, because it's like everybody had an angle. Like everybody had some kind of angle, trying to some kind of hustle, right? And so I just didn't. After I got trapped in the cigar guy's living room, it was like, okay, bro. Now if he had AC somewhere for me to sit and then maybe try a cigar, and then I would have paid for that experience. But I wasn't about to buy a whole box of cigars for 100 and something bucks, and I don't even smoke. So it. but I would have tried one. So tip for that. And then certain things we take for granted again, gifts or presents is what they call a tip. And even like the person who drive us to the airport when it was time to leave, it was a driver who spoke zero English, but his brother was actually the initial one that kind of helped us like find a ride, and he rode with us. And so, but he was like, do you have any extra pain medicine? And he didn't call it pain medicine. I forget what he called it, but it's like any extra like medicine for your head. And I'm like, I happen to have some over the counter um Aleve and Motrin. And so I did hook them up on the way out. But it's just interesting to think about like every tip is doesn't have to be in a situation like that, like cash, right? So cash, like money, currency is only as good as what you're allowed to buy or what is at your disposal to purchase, right? And so to even think about that and think through that was interesting. It's like, okay, I could give you and I ended up tipping cash too, but I can give you money, right? Or I can give you this commodity or item that you might not have access to, which is maybe more valuable to you than the money if it's something that you can't just walk into a CVS or Walgreens on, on the corner and buy, right? And so that's just interesting to think through in future travels. I honestly, I didn't know exactly what to expect going in, but I'll be honest that it definitely was not a situation where I felt relaxed and like, okay, I'm on vacation. I'm just gonna hang and chill. I definitely was not in a relaxed frame of mind or mode. But I did take away some valuable thoughts and lessons from the trip and from the interactions that I had with people. Um, so all in all, a good trip. And I'm excited to get some more stamps in my passport that's been collecting dust for the past several years. But I think in another episode, I don't know which one, but I talked about super briefly my visit to the Dominican Republic, Punta Cana, and how um, one of the things about the hospitality there that stood out to me was that their servers don't what was it that the server was telling me, if I tip on my card, right, it doesn't go to the server. And at first I thought, oh, they're just saying that because they prefer cash, because I know when I used to serve, here in the US, you prefer cash because some people claim all their cash, some people don't. It's hard to track, right? I mean, you track a percentage of sales that a server should be claiming, but if it's cash in your hand, it's just flowing. You don't really know, right? So Uncle Sam may or may not know that that money was put in your hand. So people prefer cash for that reason. And so I thought that maybe that was the reason that she was saying that, until I went to the next location and I felt bad because I didn't have cash in that scenario. Um, and so but she still took awesome care of us. And when I told her, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Like I don't have cash. I only have this debit card, and I was gonna tip you on the card." And and so I apologized to her, and she was very gracious and still served us with tip top hospitality. And so that was impressive to me, because sometimes, people, it's like, oh, I can't get that extra few dollars off you. They might forget about you or put you at the bottom of their list, but she still served us very graciously. Then we went to the next place, and the server said the same thing about the tipping on the card. And then that's when I was like, oh man, this might be something with this, but I couldn't get a straight answer from him about why. Like the boss just won't let us. The boss just won't let us. So I didn't know if that meant that if I tipped on the card, the boss would just keep the money and not give it to him, or like what that is, like what is that? But from that experience, I learned to always make sure to have plenty of cash. And uh, it's tricky because I also, you don't want to have too much cash, because I have been in a situation where I've lost like a wad of cash, and so like $300 when I was out traveling when I was in Cancun, and so that was a heartbreaking, heart wrenching, because it's like I know I had it, and I'm trying to backtrack in my head, like I took it out to do this and then that, and then going back the next day, like, hey, did anybody turn in any money? No, but it was worth the ask, right? So anyway, those are my 2 cents. Travel adventures. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And would you travel to Cuba to support the Cuban people? Would you travel there? Have you traveled there? Interested to know your feedback. That's it today. Keep in mind that your hospitality may not look like mine. My hospitality may not look like yours. But at the end of the day, hospitality is how you make someone feel. How you make someone feel at the end of their interaction with you. All right. And so that's what we're here to talk about, interesting topics in and around culinary arts and hospitality. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks for listening and or watching Hospitality Hacks Pro Show.